So there we go. Chauvin, if you've not been paying attention to the news, which would be shocking to me, but if you haven't seen it, Derek Chauvin was just found guilty on all counts: murder 2, murder 3, and man 2. I think to understand the verdict. I think once I heard guilty on murder 2, it was pretty obvious you were going to get guilty on everything else as well. We can talk about the appeal and what's going to happen there later. I think at a minimum, the murder 2 and murder 3 charges have serious risk of just being overturned on appeal for failure to properly instruct the jury, and for failure to dismiss the counts outright. Like, I'm not sure a properly understood murder 2 and murder 3, like as Alan Dershowitz talked about today on Court TV, the way that the judge allowed the felony murder rule to be used is probably unlawful. Allowing murder 3 to go to jury is probably unlawful as well. So there could be issues there. But then also, I think the issue, and one that could ultimately lead to a Supreme Court reversal, is basic, Fifth Amendment due process problem. The failure to sequester the jury, combined with the overwhelming public pressure on to find a guilty verdict. The fact that, as Alan Dershowitz pointed out, because all the jury lived in Minneapolis, which was under threat of riot, they all had a personal stake in the outcome of their deliberations. But I think that there's a valid, there's a big problem here. I don't really think there was a fair trial. But that said, I definitely got it wrong. I was overly, as Solomon Kane actually makes a decent point. My expertise blinded me to the layman's lack of sophistication. That could well be it. Also, I mean, I'm not sure, the lack of sophistication might have been the answer. The fear, or sort of, the default fear that people had of going the other way, the sort of the fact that maybe there wasn't a serious presumption of innocence. One of the things I realized was, we had this really quick verdict. And once it was quick, I was like, oh, this is going to definitely be a guilty verdict, or I was pretty confident it would be, because I just thought, like, to actually, given the nature of this case, to actually get, all 12 people on the side of acquittal would take some time at a minimum. And the fact that it didn't, and that made me realize, like, the presumption of innocence was basically gone in this case. And maybe part of that's because of the viral video, but part of that is also because of the overwhelming media coverage. It was suffocating. And you have to wonder, how much did that media coverage impact the jury? The jury was not sequestered. And so the endless, day-by-day coverage, and that was completely not objective, barely ever covering defense crosses, I think it was bad. So, it's just, I would like to think that it's, it's like, well, I just am too optimistic a person. I'm too believing in human nature. But in reality, I just made a bad prediction and got it wrong. As Will told us, this is depressing. The idea that there would have to be one juror with integrity and strength is always nonsense. Like, maybe I thought that would happen, but I was wrong. I thought there would be somebody. I do think there's a lot of grounds for reversal here. I think that at least as I said, the murder 2 and the murder 3 charges are convictions are very flimsy, just as a legal matter. The felony, it's a real stretch to apply the felony murder rule here, where the act that caused the death is also the same act that they're trying to say is the underlying felony. And then the murder 3 thing, there's the fact that the act had to be dangerous to others. So I think that there's some flimsiness there. But, as Dr. Elwanger says, you didn't make a bad prediction. You were right on the legal reasoning. You just have too much faith. Yeah, I don't know, man. I just am like somebody, maybe I'm just old school and think that, one of the things I was thinking about is, like, why did this bother me so much? I'm watching the people protest in the streets and be like, if we don't get a conviction, we're going to shut it down. And I'm like, that's so alien to what I understand to be the traditions of our country. It makes it like, that's why in To Kill a Mockingbird, it's the defense attorney who's the hero, who's defending the unpopular defendant against the ravages of the mob, right? Like, the idea that we have this entire structure in place of law and due process and reasonable doubt and the presumption of innocence to protect people from being convicted. And it's like, that totally went away. And one thesis I kind of thought about this morning, in the aftermath of, Joe Biden mouthing off about the trial, Maxine Waters mouthing off, Chuck Schumer mouthing off, Ilhan Omar mouthing off, was that the sort of, the liberals used to have this constellation of values that they cared about, right? Due process, freedom of speech, the Constitution. Generally, they were civil liberties people. In addition to things like anti-racism and anti-discrimination, it was like a constellation of values. And what's happened in the past 10 years is the way that anti-racism and anti-discrimination have swallowed up and spit out all the other liberal values to the point that they're totally irrelevant, right? Like the concept that you would say, well, this person needs to get a fair trial, and it's absolutely appalling that any politician would say anything. Like what the president of the United States said something before a verdict came down. Absurd. Like people were like, well, they're sequestered. Like sequestration is not a skiff. You shouldn't say anything until until things come down. It's not like sequestration is not foolproof. It's not like the government level classified information. So it was so out of line. And I think, as somebody like, this is the real, the black belt thing. The mob has given a verdict. The U.S. is under mob rule. And like having looked at this, seeing how the entire world will come down on you for, and even in the face of like contrary evidence that you would think, look, there's reasonable doubt here. Like the fentanyl, the fact that the guy had a 90% like blocked coronary artery, the fact that positional asphyxia is not that common in people who are not obese. I thought there was just obviously reasonable doubt on cause of death. Maybe not on use, whether the use of force was authorized, but on cause of death, absolutely. So where does the appeal go? I think the appeal has to start in the Minnesota courts. I don't actually know this. This is a complicated area of procedure because eventually, like, there can be federal involved, like federal courts can get involved if there's a due process issue. And so I think like it would go all the way to the highest court in Minnesota. And then if they're appealing a particular due process issue, that can be appealed to the Supreme Court. That's what I would assume. Yeah. So, right. Will's like, your prediction on the law wasn't the problem. It's your understanding of human nature. Perhaps like, maybe I'm not quite pessimistic enough. Like that's part. And that's what this feels like. Somebody points out that he's the sacrificial lamb to the mob. That's what it always feels like. That's what it feels like in this case. That's what I felt like for some time, that it's like, there was this just an enormous effort that this guy was going to be the martyr, not the martyr, I guess is the wrong word, the scapegoat for like, every incident that like racism in the United States, and that this guy's conviction were bad. So, somebody says, Chamberlain, you were right about the outcome of the 2020 election, which irked the hell out of me. Chauvin should have been acquitted. It was obvious, but I think the jury is terrified. I think that's right. And I appreciate you saying that. Like, I haven't gotten every prediction wrong. That was one of the easier ones, though, that we weren't going to be able to reverse the 2020 election. I didn't have to work that hard on that one. But I got it quite wrong. Adam Townsend says the jury took the only reasonable route. I'd be interested to see why he thinks that, like, it's the only reasonable route. I guess in the sense it's like you didn't want your own city to, go up in flames. So, why would you vote to acquit? Right? Like maybe you just don't want your city to burn down. Maybe you have a business interest or a job in the city. I mean, that's a heck of a thing to do, right? To say that they have to like, and then think about what the personal risk would be if they're ever revealed to be one of the jurors. I mean, this was the whole problem about, the independence. I like this. Forget it. Well, it's Chinatown. Very good. Very good. So yeah, it's not ideal. Right. Yeah. As Riley KJ says, they didn't want pig blood on the juror doors. I happen to, I'm annoyed that I made a bad prediction. I don't like ever making bad predictions, but I did here, right? Like I thought an acquittal was coming and I was wrong. But I was very contrarian, right? That prediction was not what most people were saying, but definitely got that one wrong. So, yeah, the jurors' names will come out. I did not know that's part of the process. I thought that was supposed to absolutely remain anonymous. Yeah, I mean, if it's common knowledge that your name will come out and that your identity will be revealed, well, there's no possible way to have due process in a case like this where the entire world is demanding. Somebody says they kicked the can to appeal, played it safe. I mean, I guess, yeah, that's what maybe you could say the jury did that, but it's really hard to overcome a jury verdict on appeal, right? Like it would be very, very challenging. The courts do their job because I really think that the correct answer here is almost certainly an acquittal. So I very much hope that. What else do we have here? I can't believe cops from other states are volunteering in Minnesota tonight. Why? I don't know. I'm not going to speak to like this sort of stuff about. I'm not going to advocate cops stop doing their job. I think their job is really important. even if modern American society doesn't seem to value it very much. But I'm not going to root on. I'm not black pilled person. I'm not going to root on destruction. Yeah. I can't imagine that Chauvin's Sixth Amendment right to an impartial jury was not violated. I think that's probably correct. I can't imagine it either. I didn't watch all of voir dire. It was hard to do it. I agree that the settlement during jury selection was outrageous. I mean, there's so many different grounds for appeal. Starting from the beginning, failure to postpone the trial until after the settlement, failure to move the trial out of Minneapolis, failure to properly instruct the jury, like telling the jury, like, don't watch the news. It's just not good enough. It's 2021. Everybody has their phone on them all the time. Like, what are you going to do? Put your phone away, and not use it for 3 weeks? I just think, the idea that instruction would be sufficient, that the jury didn't need to be sequestered here, I think is pretty ridiculous. I understand why having at first made the decision not to sequester the judge didn't change their mind, but jury should have been sequestered from the outset. I mean, this trial was obviously something that was broadly out there. So. Somebody says, I know this is off subject, but I feel like John Adams' defense of the Redcoats during the Boston Massacre was crucial for due process and presumption of innocence. How does it apply here? Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I actually, I guess this is where I'm a lawyer, and having read a lot about lawyers and being very sympathetic to criminal defense attorneys in general, I come from the perspective of like, it's a good thing to defend someone who would otherwise seem indefensible. And I felt that way. One of the things that really angered me when in sort of, when I was a younger person was when, they're like Liz Cheney and the Republicans went after attorneys who defended Guantanamo Bay detainees. And I see the heroes as clearly the lawyers who are willing to take public opprobrium and fight for the rights of the people who are loathed publicly, right? To make sure that they get due process to try and fight for their freedom. And I think, Eric Nelson, I think he did a made a valiant effort here. I think, looks like it might not be working anymore. Okay. Are we back? I think I might have had a freeze there, brief freeze. All right. Anyway, not a lawyer. Why was this trial even in Minneapolis? Fair question. I don't think it should have been. I think it's obvious. The judge was surprised that politicians would continue to opine about the trial and naivete. Yeah, I think the judge was pretty naive in terms of the way he was handing out his instructions. Really should have been tried for murder. This was a murder conviction. They were convicted on murder too. How much did media influence the outcome? I don't know, right? It's hard to know, and that's part of the problem not sequestering the jury, right? The answer in real life should be zero, or like absolute case. Larry Evans says something interesting. He says they did keep the thugs from, I guess, probably destroying the country. I wouldn't be a cop for nothing. I mean, I'm blown away by people who just, will continue to be cops in the aftermath of this. This is a great line from Kathy Rokamp. The mob is the mother of tyranny. That's very good. Hi, Johan asked if the appellate courts have a jury. No, that's just judges. And I think it may take ultimately judges to make this right. When would a mistrial be declared? Well, now there's not going to be. I don't know that appellate courts ever declare a mistrial, so to speak. I'm not sure if that's what they call it. I mean, they might agree. They might toss the conviction and order a new trial at this point. But usually, I think mistrial is only like the proper terminology when the trial is ongoing, or immediately afterwards. Jurors were terrified. I think that's correct. Eric Nelson's a good lawyer. I worried about the whole David v. Goliath approach. He couldn't highlight vital contradictions with the jury. Yeah, I think he needed a partner. This was, the sheer amount of stuff that was dumped on him. The fact that like the state of Minnesota dumped so many resources into this case, and so many like attorneys came out and do pro bono work. I thought, I was very. It was just like. It's like they were going to make the guy the scapegoat. They were going to get a conviction no matter what they had to do, no matter how aggressive they had to be in terms of Like, I never got the feeling that the prosecutors were more interested in justice than they were for zealously getting a conviction. I never got that feeling. So, is this the shit show of the year? Might well be. Right. As Sharon says, there can't be a mistrial now, but there will be an appeal and the conviction could get tossed. Right. And I think, if I'm betting, I am still quite optimistic about the second and third, at least the second degree murder conviction getting tossed. That felony murder, that would basically swallow up manslaughter. The way that the jury instruction went for second degree murder, it's basically like, if you assaulted someone, that can be the predicate for unintentional murder, period. Right. If you assaulted someone and they died, the assault is a felony, so that's felony murder. Well, that means whenever you commit involuntary manslaughter, there's almost certainly some sort of third degree assault involved there too. So that means that there's no second degree manslaughter anymore, and everybody who kills someone has committed second degree murder. So that probably is why, like, that probably isn't legally tenable, which is why I think the second degree murder charge will get tossed. But we're still looking at, Chauvin's going to have to, at a minimum, he's probably going to be sentenced to a very serious, a very, very serious amount of time, and he'll have to wait and see if that gets shortened by winning some of these things on appeal. Somebody says, why is it a wrong decision? He had his knee across the throat, and when people told him to move, they could see the guy couldn't breathe. At that point, it's murder. I think part of the reason is that there was reasonable doubt on whether or not that was even the cause of death. The guy had 90% blocked heart artery, had fentanyl and methamphetamine in his system. Positional asphyxia is apparently very rarely causes death among people who don't have obesity, because that's necessary to press the lungs into the cavity. And I think there was reasonable doubt on causation. I don't know that it's obvious that he suffocated. Like, I know I guess the jurors just believed Tobin and disbelieved Dr. Fowler, but I wouldn't be so confident as to think I could parse between them and know who was right. Like, Dr. Fowler's explanation seemed quite persuasive to me. So, like, that's why it's wrong. In my view, that's why it's a wrong decision. Like, I don't think it's reasonable to think that absolutely how George Floyd died. Right? That's why I think it's not a reasonable verdict. But that's now not the decision. When the president calls you guilty, how is that not grounds for appeal? I assume that you have to prove some prejudice, right? So you have to prove that it all had some impact on the jury. But the sheer amount of problems here, you can't imagine that a jury wasn't a problem. And yeah, as Nullsec says, why would anybody be a cop now? I don't know. Yeah, the issue was, I thought, I think the big problem here is that, and this is also a fair trial issue, but that Chauvin had trouble locating experts, and for obvious reasons, who would want to be an expert with this massive mob pressure? Like, it's not obvious to me that under these circumstances, Chauvin could ever get a really fair trial where you have so much public pressure on and like public condemnation of people who even testify on his behalf. So, yeah, I think so. That's what I got. Anyway, I think I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but yeah, no, I got it wrong. I may have just either underestimated human nature, underestimated how sophisticated the jury was, overestimated both the sophistication of the jury and maybe the courage of the jury. Who knows exactly what went on in those deliberations? But I really thought, obviously, there was reasonable doubt. If I were sitting in that jury room, based on what I heard, I would have voted to acquit. Not because I know that Chauvin didn't kill Floyd, but because I can't, as an intellectual matter, I couldn't intellectually honestly say that I know it was suffocation. And I don't understand how people think that they can do that. That people are wildly overconfident in their medical knowledge to be able to say that Dr. Fowler was full of it and Dr. Tobin was telling the God's honest truth. It just didn't make sense to me. Anyway, so that's what seems screwed up to me. But somebody says Chauvin doesn't deserve a fair trial. He got a trial at least. There you go. Like, if you're actually looking for the best explanation of like what modern 2020 America is, that's what you've got. Like, he should be thankful he got a trial, even if it wasn't fair, and that he doesn't deserve a fair trial. That's what I mean. Anti-racism has entirely swallowed up like normal liberal values of things like due process, First Amendment, the rights of criminal defendants, and it's just swallowed up and said that if somebody's the wrong like persuasion, they don't deserve even a fair trial. Like, that's literally that you've like demonstrated my point entirely, and demonstrated the point of everybody who's concerned about like what this means for our country. Like, you just don't care about whether somebody gets a criminal defendant gets a fair trial because you don't like them. Like, I think everyone deserves a fair trial. Maybe that's just me. Maybe it's because I'm a lawyer. Maybe it's because I like don't like seeing people railroaded. That's just me. So anyway, on that note, I think I will let it go there. But this is, thank you, Yvette, for, crystallizing the zeitgeist for us. Peace.